Docket 0177 on community choice energy. This is an initiative that was authored by myself and my dear colleague and friend to my left, at-large City Councilor Michelle Wu. And we're also joined by my dear friend and colleague, the District 2 City Councilor Ed Flynn. As many of us know, community choice energy would allow the city to use its bulk purchasing power to negotiate the cost of electricity for residents and small businesses. The city will solicit bids for a default aggregation of at least 5% Class 1 renewable sourcing above the RPS renewable portfolio standard, as well as bids for 100% renewable opt-in aggregation option. Since the start of 2017, over 140 cities and towns across the Commonwealth have implemented community choice aggregation. It is a successful model. Councillor Wu and I first filed the hearing order in January of last year, January of 2017. On April 25th of 2017, we held a working session to introduce the issue formally before the City Council. Then in August of last year, we filed an authorization hearing. On October 3rd, we hosted a marathon meeting. Many of you were there at the Winter Chamber across the street at 26 Court Street. The following day, the City Council unanimously passed the order. We were delighted. To check in on progress as well as to talk about some challenges that have arisen. We filed a hearing order again, Councillor Wu and I, in March of this year, and have been keeping in touch with other relevant stakeholders. On February 20th of this year, the Environment Department released its RFI, Request for Information, and we'll get into more specifics on that, including why it was an RFI as opposed to a RFP and some other questions that I know my colleagues and I share. Before we get into opening statements from my colleagues, I did want to pass along two notes, one from Councillor Timothy McCarthy from District 5, who writes, I'm writing to apologize for not being able to attend today's Committee on Environment, Sustainability and Parks hearing as I am home with pneumonia. I want to state for the record, I support my friend and colleague in their efforts and fight for policies that will help save our planet. I'm looking forward to reviewing the tape, to any further discussion regarding the implementation of CCE that will result from this hearing. And if you are watching, Councillor McCarthy, we hope you all feel better soon. Secondly, District 1 City Councilor Lydia Edwards writes, Dear Councillor O'Malley and colleagues, thank you for your leadership in advancing clean energy for all Bostonians. I firmly support the swift implementation of community choice energy and am grateful for the active engagement of Boston residents on this issue. It is critically important for Boston to lead on issues of climate change. It is also important to understand that this process has numerous safeguards built in with substantial review at the Department of Public Utilities. While I support thoughtful crafting of an aggregation proposal, we should move swiftly to ensure timely completion of the lengthy and multi-stage process. Finally, I support the creation of a formal community stakeholder group to oversee the implementation of community choice energy. I regret that I cannot join you today for the hearing. Please read this letter into the record. Regard, Lydia Edwards, City Councilor, District 1. Before I get into my opening statements, I wanted to turn the floor over to at-large City Councilor Michelle Wu for any opening thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to everyone who has taken the time to be here again and again and again. We're very excited about the potential and the prospect, looking forward to getting an update, and we'll continue to push for as swift implementation as possible. Every day that we're not doing this, we are missing out on opportunities for the city to be greener, for residents to have access to that clean energy, and for all of us to do our part towards that vision of Boston that we're hoping for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Chair O'Malley, and thank you for your leadership, and thank you for the leadership of Councillor Wu as well. I'm glad to attend today's hearing. Last year, the City Council voted in favor of community choice energy and clean energy in Boston. I hope this hearing today can help us understand what next steps are needed. I know community choice energy has had great success, and I hope we can work towards implementation in Boston and that we can move forward with next steps. Again, just want to say thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, and thank you to the leadership of Councillor Wu as well.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. I am going to, as my prerogative as the chair, read a brief letter from Martha Grover, who could not join us today. Martha is the Energy Efficiency Manager for the town of Melrose, and I think that she just very succinctly addresses 2 points which I wanted to read before we get into our panel to perhaps offer their perspective and their reflection. It reads, The cities and towns around Massachusetts have chosen to offer an affordable electric supply option to their residents and businesses, which is 5 years ahead of the state's renewable energy requirement. Welcome Boston's efforts to do the same. As the City of Boston considers its next steps in rolling out the Community Choice Energy Program, I offer two main takeaways from the Melrose experience. First, the decision by Mayor Dolan in June of 2017 to temporarily end our program after a successful 18 months was the right decision at the time for Melrose ratepayers and was not considered a failure by anyone. It was seen as a continued effort by the city to look out for the interests of our residents, just as the launch of our community electricity aggregation program was in November of 2015. An unprecedented spike in capacity costs in our load zone that was 5 times historical averages, and the manner in which National Grid is allowed by DPU to set basic service rates as an average across all 3 zones resulted in an inability last spring to procure supply bids in our zone that were less than basic service. Communities in Eversource's territory did not experience the same disadvantage last year. A recent study showed the success of aggregation in procuring rates less than Eversource basic service, even with additional local renewable energy in the mix. Now that capacity prices are falling again in our zone, our new mayor, Inferna, is resubmitting an aggregation plan to DPU in hopes of relaunching our program in early 2019. The Melrose Board of Aldermen unanimously supported this initiative at an April meeting. The second takeaway from our program that was completely unexpected and for me has become one of the most important aspects is the raised level of awareness and general understanding among residents about their electric bills and where their energy supply comes from. The residents I hear from on a daily basis with questions about their electric bills are senior citizens and those with low or fixed incomes who appreciate the fact that there is someone at City Hall who can help them decipher their bill, get out of a bad competitive supply contract, and refer them to our local ABCD office for heating fuel assistance or to Mass Save for a home energy assessment. At our annual senior discount fair, my table is the busiest because no one else is out there giving them the same unbiased information and assistance about something that is unnecessarily complicated, their monthly electric bill. Even after our program ended, I continue to be asked to give Electric Bill 101 presentations at local low-income housing complexes and at our senior center. Armed with accurate information, these most vulnerable residents are better prepared to handle the many direct marketing calls and door-to-door salespeople who are selling overpriced electric supply contracts. These residents tell me that they just say with confidence that they are in the city program and hang up or shut the door, and they can't wait for our program to return. I applaud your efforts and am happy to offer any assistance as your program gets rolled out. Sincerely, Martha Grover. Now, I wanted to read that, and thank you again to Ricky Harvey, who put me in touch with Ms. Grover, because since we passed this, the number of our colleagues in cities and towns around the Commonwealth that have been so excited about this, as excited, I think, as many in this room are, has been remarkable. People want this to work. We all want this to work. So let's figure out how we can make this work as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Did you want to start with the video test?
Maybe the panelists give opening remarks.
Perfect, perfect, okay. So, Allison, if you could just please introduce yourself, any brief opening remarks, and then we'll just move down to your right. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Allison Brzezius, the Director of Climate and Environmental Planning for the Environment Department. Councilors, thank you for having me here today. I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have, and I have 2 major updates since the last hearing. So as you mentioned, Councilor O'Malley, after consultation with the DOER, we released an RFI in February. It included questions about municipal aggregation program implementation and administration, procurement of electricity supply and program recs, other municipal electricity aggregations, and indicative pricing. We shared the request with energy experts, environmental nonprofits, and community groups. We held an information session about the RFI in March, and we directly reached out to nearly 100 of those groups seeking information on and responses to the RFI. We received 19 responses, and 13 of those had extensive detailed information. Those are available online if anyone would like to read them. Most of the responses touched on renewable energy procurement strategies and how to structure an aggregation program. They also provided information that will be very useful in developing a CCA program. However, what we didn't receive was as much information as we had hoped on pricing. We were hoping respondents would share their historical price data that would allow us to estimate CCA cost savings to ratepayers. We are still seeking this information on pricing, and as a component of this search, we are looking to other sources of information, including Carbon Free Boston. We expect Carbon Free Boston to evaluate CCA and how it would contribute to getting us to carbon neutrality. CFB will analyze the relative greenhouse gas impacts of policies including CCA, and to the extent feasible, assess their long-term benefits and costs. This will provide valuable additional information. In addition, the mayor has requested funding in FY19 for technical analysis and implementation of CCA. Look forward again to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate your inviting me. I'm Ann Berwick. I'm the Sustainability Director for the City of Newton. Newton's moving ahead with CCA. And before working for the City of Newton, I was the Chair of the Department of Public Utilities under Governor Patrick. The Department of Public Utilities, as I'm sure you know, reviews and approves municipalities' proposed aggregation plans. So I've been at this from a number of different perspectives. I just want to start by saying that municipal aggregation is a hugely significant environmental program, and I'm sure I don't have to really try to persuade the folks in this room of that. Municipal aggregation with a substantial Class 1 renewable component is far and away the most significant thing that cities and towns can do to lower their greenhouse gas emissions. Far and away the most useful program. Also, it's not necessary to reinvent this wheel. As Chair O'Malley mentioned, over 140 cities and towns have municipal aggregation programs. This is not rocket science. The most important thing any city or town can do to get municipal aggregation rolling is to hire an aggregation consultant. And that firm, whoever you choose, will know the answers to virtually all of the questions that Boston posed in its RFI on aggregation. However, it will not be able to answer your questions on pricing. Trying to get pricing information now will not be fruitful. Boston is clearly at least a year and a half away from entering into a supply contract for municipal aggregation. Nobody's going to be able to tell you now what the prices are going to be then. Now, will electricity customers save money? Mayor Fuller in Newton committed in her State of the City address to my giving 100 presentations over the course of this year to community groups about municipal aggregation. And I assure you that every single one asked whether, as electricity customers, they will save money or end up spending more money. I have been cautious in Newton not to promise to anyone that they will save money with a substantial renewable component. Of course, we don't know yet we haven't decided yet what our renewable component will be. Even without a green component, there are likely to be times over the duration of the municipality's supply contract when electricity prices under the aggregation will be higher than Eversource's prices, and times when it will be lower. Over the duration of the supply contract, even with a reasonably significant renewable component, electricity ratepayers should be able to save money. But again, I would be careful not to guarantee that. A 5% renewable component is very inexpensive. And the money that is saved by virtue of being an aggregation should, not necessarily definitely will, but should cover the cost of that 5% and perhaps even more than 5%. So I want to also make, I think, an important point in that regard, which is that almost every household has the ability, by virtue of energy efficiency maneuvers, to lower their electricity prices enough to make up for any potential increase in price related to an aggregation. So an aggregation shouldn't cost more than Eversource's basic service rates, but even if it does, there are so many opportunities to lower a household's electricity bill by virtue of energy efficiency. Okay, just to clear up a couple of points of confusion that sometimes arise, addressing Martha Grover's point, I just want to make really clear, because Martha has sometimes used the term pause their aggregation. You can't pause an aggregation. Cities and towns can't pop in and out of aggregations. Individuals can, cities and towns can't. You can understand why that would be the case, right? Because Eversource has to plan for its load when it goes out to bid for power. Also, cities and towns enter into their own supply contracts. So they can't pop in and out of those supply contracts. Individuals, however, can opt out at any time with no fee. Another point of confusion that sometimes arises, this is an opt-out program. That means you as a ratepayer are in this program unless you do something to get yourself out. And that is a matter of state law. The cities and towns can't change that. It has to be an opt-out program. You can give people lots of options. You can give people the option to go to 100%. You can give people the option to opt out entirely. But as designed, this is an opt-out program. So that's really about it. I just want to emphasize what an important program this is in order to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of a city or town. And also point out that there are, I think has already been mentioned, some significant consumer protection aspects to municipal aggregation programs. People who are participating in municipal aggregation programs can ignore all of these calls and emails that ask them buy electricity from me and they don't know what the whether some of these are scams, what the costs of getting out at some point in the future if they choose to do that. So these are trustworthy, city-vetted programs that protect consumers. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Dr. Stanton.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Liz Stanton. I'm the Director and Senior Economist of the Applied Economics Clinic. We're based in Somerville, and we're a nonprofit consulting group providing expertise on energy, the environment, and equity issues. We had the opportunity last fall to study Boston's Community Choice Energy Aggregation Program, and then again in March to update some of those results as new numbers were available. And that information, reports and updates can be found on our website. And I just wanted to go over a few of the main results of that again to have it in the record here. I'll start by wholeheartedly seconding the very measured discussion of benefits that former Commissioner Berwick just provided. Our look at those benefits was looking into the past to see what has happened so far for municipalities in Massachusetts. And in looking at that history to see what could be possible for Boston going forward. And what we found was that thus far, municipalities in Massachusetts have saved money for their consumers. And the reason for those savings, these programs have very low administrative costs. There is the increasingly competitive costs of renewable generation as compared to fossil fuel generation. And then there's the role of the municipality in being big enough to bargain in a way that an individual household or small business consumer isn't. Of course, in addition to the potential economic benefits for Boston consumers, there are also environmental benefits. Engaging in community choice energy aggregation brings environmental benefits, including more local renewable energy and lower greenhouse gas emissions. I can speak also as a resident of Arlington. We've had a successful rollout of this program in our town. Of course, Boston is much larger than Arlington and than any of the municipalities that have taken this on in Massachusetts so far. There'll be different considerations for Boston. On the whole, I expect that the size of Boston puts it at an advantage, not a disadvantage. And Boston's larger size will put it in a stronger bargaining position, both in terms of its ability to bargain for rates and in its ability to bargain for the per kilowatt hour administrative costs of a managing group or a aggregation consultant. I'm happy to answer questions about the results of our study, if that's helpful.
Thank you very much. We will get to that.
Good morning, and thank you, Councillor Wu, Councillor O'Malley, and Councillor Flynn for the opportunity to speak on this important topic today. And thanks to all of you, especially Spider-Man over there, for taking time out of your busy schedules today to participate. My name is Winston Vaughn. I'm a proud resident of Dorchester and the Senior Manager for Renewable Energy at Ceres. Ceres is a sustainability nonprofit based here in Boston, working with some of the most influential investors and companies to build leadership and drive solutions throughout the economy. Through powerful networks and advocacy, Ceres tackles the world's biggest sustainability challenges, including climate change, water scarcity and pollution, and human rights abuses. This past winter brought climate change home to Boston when, in the span of just a few weeks, 200-year storms hit our city, flooding our streets, our communities, and even our tea. Those storms must serve as an urgent call to action for all of us here in Boston. It is clearer than ever before that we need to act now and act on climate if we're to preserve our city and protect our residents. Yet in Washington, D.C., our leaders are going backwards, not forwards, announcing their intention to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement and undoing critical regulations designed to build a sustainable and prosperous future for all Americans. While D.C. slides backwards, others are stepping up to fill that leadership gap, and we're seeing climate leadership emerging in new and sometimes unexpected places. Cities, states, universities, private companies, and even individual citizens are stepping up to do their part to build a sustainable economy powered with clean energy. Last year, the City of Boston and many major companies and organizations joined together with over 2,700 of their peers across the United States, collectively representing 160 million people and $6.2 trillion in GDP, to sign the We Are Still In Declaration, pledging our continued support for climate action and promising to do our part to meet the target set forward in the Paris Agreement. Additionally, Ceres has joined with investors globally to launch an initiative called the Climate Action 100+, which is backed by over 250 investors who collectively represent over $30 trillion in assets to push the companies with the largest greenhouse gas footprints to cut their emissions. Boston deserves enormous credit for standing up and speaking out at that critical moment. And that message that Boston is still in helped inspire the rest of the world to stick with its commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement. However, as important and as inspiring as that statement is, we all know that declarations alone won't stop the waters from rising, and it won't stop our storms from getting stronger. Even the boldest words simply are not enough to protect our city. We need to back those words up with action, we need to get results, and we must not delay. Thankfully, there is no cause to. There are cost-effective solutions out there that we can implement right away. Solutions that can save Boston residents money and create jobs and opportunities right here in our city. Shifting from fossil fuels to renewable energy is one of the best ways that Boston can make a big impact and make that impact now. Across the country, renewable energy prices are falling. And in many markets, the cost of wind and solar are already well below the cost of traditional fossil fuel-based energy. As a result, businesses here in Boston and around the world are committing to power their operations with renewable energy. In fact, over 130 companies have committed to going 100% renewable, including household names like IKEA, Walmart, Apple, Google, Nike, Starbucks, and Kellogg's. And even TD Bank, whose name graces the home of our Boston Celtics, has committed to 100% renewable energy. And hundreds more have set more modest but really important clean energy goals. These businesses are taking action because they want to be leaders in addressing the climate crisis, but also because clean energy makes business sense for them. If Walmart can choose 100% renewable energy, surely Boston can as well. If we're going to meet the targets set forth in the Paris Climate Agreement and limit climate change to well below the 2 degrees centigrade that we need everybody, not just corporate America, to make the shift to clean power. Yet there are still barriers that keep Boston's small businesses and residents from making that leap to renewable energy. Most lack the scale, the expertise in energy contracts and financing, and the large legal teams to do what these sophisticated companies have already done. That is exactly what makes community choice aggregation so important. By pooling our buying power and negotiating together as a city, we can give Boston's small businesses and residents the same access to affordable, low-cost power that major U.S. companies have. Boston has built a well-deserved reputation for being a national leader on climate. But if we are to achieve our goal of reducing Boston's emissions 25% by the year 2020, and in doing so help the United States and the world achieve our goal of a stable climate for future generations, we need urgent action. It's time to remove the barriers that keep Boston, our residents, and our businesses from enjoying the benefits of clean energy. And community choice aggregation is a proven solution that can make that impact right away. Thank you.
Thank you, Winston. 3 quick housekeeping items. First, this hearing is being televised and streamed, so be aware if you wish to speak, you may be on television or streamed on someone's laptop. Secondly, wanted to thank our dear colleague and friend, City Councilor at Large Michael Flaherty, who's joined us. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. And then third, there's a testimony sheet, sign-in sheets at the back near Ronnie. If you have not signed in and would like to testify, please do so. I've got several sheets already. We'll make sure we get to everybody. So we're going to go through a quick round of questions among the councilors. We'll do 1 round of questions, and then we will have a brief video testimony, and then a second round if necessary, and then we'll go into public testimony. I want to be mindful and respectful of everybody's time. It is the middle of the day, so I'm going to impose a 5-minute limit on every councilor, starting with myself, and I will begin now. Allison, delighted to have you with us. So please don't take this the wrong way. I'm disappointed that Chief Blackman is not with us as well, for the simple reason, as Winston said, you know, there's not only a lack of leadership in Washington, there's outright hostility to the issues that all of us hold dear, that I know Mayor Walsh holds dear, that I know Austin Blackman holds dear. We're working to try to help advance things because it is up to cities and towns to lead on climate. CCA is a great tool. The mayor supports it. I know your shop supports it. I'm a little concerned, and I think, you know, Ann Berwick hit a good point too, that the way we submitted the RFI may have tied our hand around our back as we were trying to get this off the ground. So I guess my question to you is, why did we include the pricing info on our RFI when very few businesses, I would think, would be able to provide such a thing?
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. A point of clarification, the historical pricing information that the pricing information we were seeking was historical pricing information. We're fully aware that no one's going to give us with an RFI future pricing, or would be able to, because it is in the future. What we're looking for is a single point, at least, of comparison. In the past, had we, say, last year, instituted CCA, we can tell what the pricing and the RECs would have been. What would the cost have been to our residents if we had implemented last year, as a simple point of information or comparison to move forward?
Is that typical? Did Newton do that when you were at the DP? Did Arlington do that? Do you know?
I can't speak to Arlington, but Newton did not do that. To my knowledge, when I was at the DPU, so I probably, or not I personally, but the DPU, so there are 3 commissioners, I was chair of the commission. While I was there, we probably approved, 70 or 80 municipal aggregation plans. And I don't know everything that occurred at the municipal level, but I didn't hear anything about cities and towns going out with RFIs. In general, it's very important to have a specific aggregation consultant, very, very helpful to a city or town that's going to undertake a municipal aggregation program. I think that's what all or virtually all cities and towns have done in order to get the kinds of information that I think you were looking for in the RFI.
Well, I mean, and anyone can jump into this, and again, I want this more of a conversation. I'm just really trying to wrap my brain around it. I would think Boston would be such an attractive market for many potential partners in this initiative. What went wrong? Was it the way that we just
When you say what went wrong, I'm not sure.
Why didn't we receive, Allison, we didn't receive any?
We did not receive any responses to the indicative pricing question in the RFI.
But we received responses to the other questions.
Yeah, we received.
So because the indicative pricing question wasn't listed, that shut it down.
No, we received a lot of valuable information
Yeah.
from the RFI on the other 3 topics that we had numerous questions to. It was that question that we didn't receive any responses to, and we believe that that's an important piece of information to have as we move towards outreach with our residents and to move forward with the program.
So we're not moving moving forward with the
No,
program?
we absolutely are, but we think that an important component is to obtain that information.
So how has this affected the time? And again, you're in the hot seat today. I know you care deeply about this and agree with us, so I apologize if I'm being hard on you, but
No, absolutely.
what's a reasonable timeline that you guys think that we could actually make the switch to CCE or CCA?
So as you said, we're absolutely committed to moving forward in this, but we need to make sure that it's going to be a program that does not adversely impact our residents, and we think that pricing is an important part of that. So we're continuing to seek information on pricing as we move forward with other pieces. We're looking to the Carbon Free Boston report for what information they can provide about how carbon-free fits into our path to carbon neutrality. We hope to have that piece in the fall, and we're continuing to move forward looking for that information.
I guess it's just getting a little frustrating because I feel like that this is a recurring theme of kicking the can down the road, so to speak. I mean, there was opposition not from you, but from others as we got to the plastic bag ordinance, because we wanted to look at a holistic approach down the road. And I just worry that as every month moves on, we're dropping the ball here, to mix metaphors. Any way that we can. I guess my last question, I'm over 5 minutes, so I'll return to it in the next round, but maybe very, very briefly to our 3 sort of experts. Do you think the way Boston rolled out our RFIs was problematic, and do you think there's another approach that we should take moving forward? Very briefly.
I'll take a shot at that. I mean, I knew nothing about Boston's approach until about 3 days ago, so the last thing I want to do is be critical of what Boston has done. But I will say, from coming at it from both the Newton perspective and the Department of Public Utilities perspective, that I think, probably you've gotten useful information in response to the RFI, but the most efficient thing to do in moving forward with a municipal aggregation program is to do an RFP and get an aggregation consultant.
So RFP, just so those know, that's request for proposal.
Right.
RFI is request for information.
Right, and once you choose, so Newton went out to bid for an aggregation consultant. I think virtually all other cities and towns that have done aggregation programs have done that. We got 3 respondents, one of which was from a state other than Massachusetts and clearly had no experience with our state's aggregation approach. So we effectively had 2 highly competent consultants bid in, and working with the consultant we chose has been easy, efficient, and has answered, I would say, all of the questions in the RFI that are answerable at this moment. I just want us to reiterate that community choice aggregation is not rocket science. It's in a state law of about 3 paragraphs, and 140 other cities and towns have done that, about 40 of which have done so-called green aggregations. It's not that complicated.
Okay. Did you want to respond to that, Allison?
Yeah, I just wanted to add briefly that one of our very first steps was to consult with DOER and DPU, and they were supportive of taking the RFI as the first step, as I believe Council was.
Was it their suggestion that we take the RFI as the first step, or did we present it and they said that's fine, that's your prerogative?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I'd have to
Okay,
check with Chief
okay.
Blackman. I wasn't in that meeting.
Thank you, okay. Councillor Wu?
Thank you. So, I mean, I think we know kind of what the main push of today will be. I just want to, at the expense of sort of beating the horse, why not just hire an aggregate consultant?
Are you saying why not issue an RFP?
Yes, for the consultant, to be able to help us find all the information that you're saying that we need to move forward with the program. Understanding that, I guess I should say, that this isn't a budget issue either for the city, because the consultants often work on spec and would only get paid if the contract comes to fruition. Is that correct? Is that your understanding?
That is, I would have to check on that. I'm not.
Would anyone else like to chime in on that?
Yeah, generally the way it works is that the ratepayers end up, once the aggregation is actually in place, the ratepayers end up paying a tiny fraction of their electricity costs to the consultant, and that's the way the consultant gets funded. There are a couple, well, I would say, I don't know, maybe a handful of cities and towns that have put municipal funding, additional municipal funding into supporting the program. But that's not true of most cities and towns. And it is the case that Newton pays my salary, not that much I would add, but, and it's not the only thing I do, work on municipal aggregation. But generally speaking, cities and towns don't kick in money to fund the municipal aggregation. It gets funded by ratepayers, and the consultant is at risk for the whole year, or many months anyway, that the consultant is working to get this program off the ground. They don't actually get paid. They have to wait until the supply contract is signed and the program is fully in place to get any money.
So Allison, could you just explain, and again, this is not you, this is others, and I'm sorry that you're here to absorb this, it's been going on much longer. If we know that the way to move forward most efficiently and without cost to the city is to issue the RFP for a consultant who will help us find that information, if we know that, as you say, the city intends to move forward, why not just move forward? Why continue to delay unless we think there's some reason that it would potentially not move forward?
So my understanding is that part of the reason we moved forward with an RFI was in order to get the information we needed to be able to draft an appropriate RFP and get pricing to set the budget. And that this historical pricing information is of use to us and important to us to understand what scale of RFP to move forward with. Also, some of the responses to the RFI indicated that it still is an open question about what type of aggregation consultant we would want to select. Some set their pricing, say, per megawatt hour, correct? They'll do, as you said, there'll be a fee up front, right?
I'm actually not aware of any
So an adder?
aggregation consultant that doesn't get paid in the fashion that I just indicated. That is,
The mill
as
adder.
a percentage, a tiny percentage of the kilowatt hours that are being purchased under the aggregation, so
Yeah.
that it's not required for the city to itself to spend any money to fund the consultant, although a few cities and towns have chosen to do that.
Yeah, so that's what I was referring to, that would be an adder, right? You'd refer to that as an adder, a cost per megawatt hour?
Well,
For
it
example.
could work that way, or the city of Newton has put into its budget about $25,000 for community engagement efforts. So very small amount of money to help educate the community. But essentially, the funding is coming out of ratepayers, a percentage of what ratepayers pay, and that's what funds the consultant.
So one issue that we're looking at is that at our scale, that type of adder would be a very substantial and recurring cost. And we would want to evaluate, as we were cautioned by the CAPE aggregation program, whether that's the right approach for aggregation in the city of Boston.
So do you foresee a situation where the city would proceed with either no consultant or a consultant hired out of city funds rather than the eventual mill adder?
Those are all three options that we're evaluating right now. Absolutely.
And, okay, sorry, I know I'm running out of time. Have you consulted directly with other municipalities like Newton or Melrose or any others?
Yes, we've consulted with other municipalities of our size and a number of municipalities across Massachusetts. I can find you the list if that would be helpful.
Because it seems like a lot of them would be able to provide you the information that you said we didn't get.
The information that we didn't get was the historical pricing information.
But wouldn't these cities and towns be able to tell us how much they had paid?
I can look into that. My understanding is that we haven't received it from any source, but if anyone has that information available, we would absolutely welcome it, and we will reach out again. I can confirm whether or not we've been able to get it from them.
Is that something that cities are usually willing to share if another city had reached out and just asked for it directly?
No?
Yep, you're good.
There we
We
go.
control the impact, so don't worry about having to push buttons.
A couple things. One is that we performed a survey of municipalities having similar programs to what Boston was proposing at that time, and found exactly this, that this is how towns are doing it. And just to be clear, because I feel like maybe a little confusion has entered in, when we're talking about this adder, this small cost per kilowatt hour, it's less than a cent per kilowatt hour, very small, and it isn't something that the towns are collecting and paying out of their budgets. It's something that consumers are paying as an adder to each kilowatt hour that's kind of a tiny invisible adder to each kilowatt hour they're buying, it's not a municipal outlay.
Yeah, I think at the last working session, Maggie Downey from Cape Light had just said her recommendation from doing this for a long, long time was to also think about paying consultants or external vendors just for the services they render, because if someone was kind of in perpetuity gaining something from Boston's contract, however small that is, that given the size of our city, it could end up being a lot more than other cities and towns.
Exactly, yeah.
And there might be a way to cap that. I mean, I feel that isn't an appropriate excuse or sufficient excuse, because we know how to get there, we know what we want to do, and it just seems like we're waiting for information that if we just directly asked people for, we would receive. We'd be able to get, Professor Stanton, you've already gotten that information just as a researcher reaching out to cities and towns, so.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'm not aware, and I'm betting, I'm not aware of any city or town of the 140 that has gone forward without an aggregation consultant. I don't think that's a viable option.
Got it.
And in terms of the information on indicative pricing or historical pricing, I don't think that's really a useful search. We would certainly be happy to share, well, we haven't, that's not going to be useful. Our aggregation hasn't gone forward yet. But if you get if Boston gets an aggregation consultant, it will be inevitably a consultant that has a fair amount of experience with aggregations in the Commonwealth. And that consultant can tell you, with respect to the cities and towns that it is familiar with, what the pricing experience has been. There isn't a world of experience out there with respect to green aggregations. We're talking about 30 or 40 only in the Commonwealth, and 2 or 3 aggregation consultants in this state, each of which has a big piece of the experience. So it's not difficult to get the historical information. How informative that historical information will be about the future is a different question. But this information is available.
So I guess I'm way over time. My final point for this first round is just, Allison, would you be willing to commit? There are so many people wanting to help and resources and folks who have the information it seems that you're saying that we need. Would you commit to convening a community advisory group regularly as a council order had requested and that we've been told is in consideration but not yet ready to move forward?
I think that's still something we're absolutely evaluating about the right time to put together.
I'm out of time.
Okay, but just to be clear, Commissioner Berwick, you did say that you'd be more than even though you don't have the indicative pricing yet, you'd be more than happy to share any information with the City of Boston, through your consultant.
And
It's a mitzvah.
we'd appreciate that.
Great,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Well, thank you, Allison. Thank you for being here and for your work on so many issues across the city. I know the goal of Community Choice Energy is to allow customers the chance to control what kind of energy they receive by offering greener options that many local power generators would provide, lower electricity rates, enhanced consumer protections, increased use of renewable technologies as well. I was just curious, what type of outreach are you doing to engage Boston residents on this, or what's the response been from people throughout the neighborhoods, and how can we all work together to come up with a better solution?
So we have a number of very active outreach efforts going on around renewable energy, energy efficiency, and other programs in the city. A lot of that is run, or all that is run, through the Greenovate Boston program. That includes also the Renew Boston program that is out there doing direct outreach to community members, helping them connect with mass save programs, do at-home energy audits. We expect to be wrapping CCA and outreach around that after we have the information we need into those active and robust outreach outlets and engagement outlets, and to be developing dedicated outreach programs around CCA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. We've also been joined by our dear colleague and friend, District Councillor Josh Zakum. Thank you, Councillor Zakum. Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here to obviously support the two lead sponsors as well as Community Choice Energy. So I can understand the administration's perspective, not wanting to roll out something that's actually going to cost the consumer more. Not quite sure that would make sense in an opt-in, opt-out situation, but I'll just speak from the perspective of competition. Competition's good. It's healthy. It's good in sports. It's good in politics. It's good in business, and most definitely would be good in energy procurement. So I think we have an opportunity to maybe learn some of the lessons from neighboring city of Newton, and we continue to double down with both the chair and the lead sponsors to find a way to make this a reality. So whether or not the council has to lead an effort around, I guess, sort of our own RFI, RFP to get the information that the administration doesn't have. But to Councilor Wu's point, I think a lot of great minds in this room and outside of this room that I think could fill the gaps to give folks a comfort level that this is obviously much needed in the city of Boston. So with that, I appreciate it and turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Zakum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Glad to be here. I look forward to reviewing the videotape of the earlier segment I couldn't be here for, but I look forward to working with you and Councilor Wu as the co-sponsors of this and the administration to get Community Choice Energy implemented, as we went through a rigorous process. Was it last year, or was it even 2016, to begin this? And I want to thank everyone for being here and for pushing this agenda to make us a more environmentally friendly community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zakum. I guess I only needed the timer for you and I, Councillor. We're allowed. with our very succinct, great colleagues. We're going to do a brief, this is about 4 or 5 minutes, some video testimony, then we're going to do a second round of questions, and then we're going to open up public testimony. So thank you, Kerry Jordan.
From BPS, and I care about CCE because I am tired of having this feeling of dread every time I selfishly charge my phone or unconsciously turn on the lights, knowing too well that I am damaging the only world we have to live on over my selfish wants to simplify my life, when there are eco-friendly ways like CCE to save our planet and still have the energy we need to sustain ourselves.
I'm also a Boston Public School student. And since the first time I learned about global warming, I haven't understood how our society can still burn fossil fuels while so many people in power have acknowledged the importance and dangers of climate change. Young people are such an important resource for this problem because our priorities aren't making money, which is really what's distracting adults in power from the real global life or death issue. CCE is the most logical solution to us emitting carbon into the atmosphere as a community.
I'm Stanley, and I'm also part of the Boston Public Schools. I love CCE because I care about my future. CCE provides us with many ways in helping and dealing with climate change. Of course I love CCE because it's a crucial factor in my life. CCE is something that will help us in the long run. It's our future, so why live for it now? I want my children, I want my family, and I want the future generation to be able to live in a place where it's safe and clean and a healthy environment.
Hi, my name's Adam, and I'm a student in Boston Public Schools. As a young person, climate change is something I have to consider in my everyday life. This issue has been dumped on us by previous generations without considering all the lives it will impact. As someone who wants to grow up in a world where I can drink clean water and breathe clean air, and see my 4-year-old cousin Nathaniel grow up without having to worry about Boston flooding with sea level rise, CCE is a necessary, bare minimum, and long overdue first step.
My name is Clark Feifeld. I live in Jamaica Plain. Community Choice Energy was passed unanimously by the City Council and signed by Mayor Walsh 7 months ago. We need to implement Community Choice Energy because it gives Bostonians access to clean energy with no extra charge and not even any extra inconvenience. Also, it's already been implemented in over 125 cities and towns across Massachusetts. Why not Boston? Well, why Boston? Boston is a coastal city. We need to be a leader in adopting clean energy. So I urge the City of Boston to implement CCE now.
Go clean energy!
All right, we're here at the Curley School. And what's your name?
Tara.
Tara? And what's your name?
Benjamin.
And what's your name?
Amelia.
And Tara, how old are you?
Almost 7.
How about you, Benjamin?
6 and 4, Baba.
And how about you, Amelia? How old are you?
3.
3? Maybe 2.5. Yes.
Not 2.
No. What are you guys excited for?
Community Choice Energy.
And when do we want it?
Now!
That's right.
Butt Chick Mama.
Let's thank Boston City Council and Mayor
Butt
Marty
Cheek
Walsh for
Mama.
passing it. Can you guys say a big thank you?
Thank you. Butt Chick
Yes,
Mom.
and let's get it implemented as soon as possible.
Butt Chick Mom.
Okay.
Butt Chick Mom. Can we see the
Great work each and every day. So we'll do a second round of questions before we get to public testimony. And I guess I'm glad we showed those adorable little movies. And I think it underscores the fact that Boston wants this. There is nobody that does, well, that's not true. I think utility companies may not want it. But other than that, people are excited about this. The fact that, you know, in the middle of an afternoon, we've got this room 2/3 filled with activists from all over, from every neighborhood. And I'm being somewhat repetitive, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. We've been through this. We had a nearly 2-year process of several hearings, several working sessions, you know, folks that were out at community meetings testifying why we wanted this, why it was important. Advocates in this room met with every single counselor, met with the mayor's administration, got a unanimous vote. There aren't that many unanimous votes in this body on major policy issues such as this. The mayor then signed it. We are so grateful for that. And I guess it's just a frustration that we feel that we're being set up for failure. And I guess, how can we address that? How can we fix that? Honestly, tell me why I'm wrong or why my suspicions are misplaced in this thing. What is a realistic timeline and approach that we can to get and implement CCE?
So I would respectfully disagree. I think we are very committed to community choice energy. We agree we want to make it happen, but with a city as large as Boston, especially, we want to make sure that we are proceeding deliberately and implementing in a way that does not end up causing harm to our residents. We want to do it right the first time.
I agree. I agree completely.
So the first step, oh, go ahead, sir.
But just, we don't even know that we can complete. As Ann said, and she knows this better than most, a 5% renewable component is very inexpensive. The money saved in aggregation should offset the increased cost. Should. It's not a guarantee. If we get to the point where, you know what, it's not going to work, at least we'll know we've tried. I feel like we're not even at that point yet, because we're not, in my opinion, making a good faith effort to try to get that ball down the field.
So on that point, so we moved immediately to consultation with the DOER. We released the RFP. We no doubt hit a roadblock, RFI, excuse me. Yes, you're right, the RFI. Deliberately to release the RFI, we got a lot of valuable information from it, but not all the information we wanted. We want information on costing that we can take to residents when we do outreach about this process. We think it's an important next step, and we're moving as quickly as we can to identify sources for that information and other sources of information that we can take advantage of. So if anyone can help us with that step, we're very much seeking additional information. I appreciate
I have 80 people who could help you with that next
Great.
step.
We absolutely welcome the information. And we're going to continue to move forward with carbon-free and our other processes, including this, to make sure that we implement it in the most responsible way possible.
No, I appreciate that, Allison. I will just say 2 things. To get there, you know, and again, this isn't directed towards you. I'm sorry that you're sitting there, and I'm sorry that you're doing this again with me on plastic bags in about 2 hours. So thank you for your patience. If we can do 2 aspects that I think would be helpful. I think everyone in this room, I know myself, I don't presume to speak for my colleagues, but I assume they will feel the same way, better about the process. If we actually get a consultant, you know, who works on spec, who will not be paid a penny of taxpayer money until we get to that point, which I think there will be no shortage of candidates for that job. If we get an actual consultant, and if we convene this community oversight hearing, we won't have these hearings if we have a good working group with Councilor Wu and I in the process, many advocates here, that can just do these check-ins. It won't have to be this formalized antagonistic approach, but it would be, so those are my two asks going forward. You may not be able to agree to those right now, but I certainly think that that's a way to at least show some good faith that we're gonna do everything we can to make sure this is done. So that's my ask. So, no, that's okay. So I'm going to leave it with that. Councilor Wu?
I wholeheartedly agree, and I would actually prioritize the community advisory working group first, because I think it's understandable and it's in the best interests of Boston residents that you and the department are concerned about potential impacts and costs and everything that we need to look at way down the line. But rather than kind of let that uncertainty paralyze us and miss out on the benefits, we have people and institutions and organizations ready to help and answer a lot of those questions. So I think that's key to getting that group going even before the consultant, and hopefully in quick succession. But having that group will be able to help evaluate what needs to happen in terms of the consultant's fees and negotiating either the cap on the adder or the amount of the adder, et cetera. It's all doable. So I guess along those lines, I just wanted to ask a little bit about the staffing of the Environment Department. How many people are in the office?
I believe between 30 and 40.
Across environment, all of EEOS? Or?
That's the Environment Department. EEOS includes other
the agencies.
departments
Okay,
like the
got it.
Inspection
So of the 30 and 40, what are the different types of projects or kind of divisions of responsibilities?
So there are 4 primary teams. There's climate and environmental planning, which oversees a lot of our work on climate change mitigation, greenhouse gas mitigation, climate resilience, Climate Ready Boston, Conservation Commission, Air Pollution Control Commission, the Zero Waste Boston process, and others. We have the Energy Policy and Programs Division, which includes our municipal energy procurement processes, et cetera, as well as other energy policy programs. And then we have Historic Preservation, which includes the Landmarks Commissions, et cetera. And we have Greenovate Boston, which is our dedicated outreach program.
Okay, and about how many people are on each of those teams, roughly, would you estimate?
Very roughly, there are about 9 in climate and environmental planning, 5 or so in energy policy and programs, 3 in dedicated Greenovate, and the remainder in administration and historic preservation.
Okay. So, and has there been a lot of turnover recently?
There's always turnover in the department as we get. I mean, we're always excited to have new people, as well as people with strong experience.
All of your positions are currently filled for, let's just say, the first 2, climate and environmental planning and energy policy and programs?
We have, all of our primary positions are currently full. We have some turnover with fellows, grant-funded positions, things like that.
Okay, I'm just trying to get an understanding of kind of the capacity. There's a lot on all of your plates.
Absolutely, and we have some, with the new fiscal FY19 request, we'll have some soon-to-be open positions that we'll talk about at 3 p.m.
Okay, and do you think that, so CCE would fall under which one? Energy policy and programs?
It would likely be a combination of multiple departments working on it, so Greenovate works with outreach. We all collaborate very closely, and then CCE would be energy policy and programs and climate and environmental planning together.
Okay, and right now, who within this structure would be the either coordinator or main contact for a potential community working group on CCE?
That's something we're still evaluating what the right place is.
Okay.
There
Do
are a
you
number of
feel
people.
that there's enough staffing that someone would be able to put this on their plate, or is it a matter of, is the evaluation more around everybody's so busy with everything else, Carbon-Free Boston and plastic bags and the conference that's coming up?
So I understand the mayor has requested for FY19 support for technical assistance. for implementation, and this would be picked up by a number of people in the team working together.
Okay, what do you mean by technical assistance?
So technical assistance for implementation.
Of CCE specifically?
Of CCE specifically is in the FY19 request.
And that's a position or just funding for
Funding
external
to
contracts?
be determined what the right allocation of those resources is.
Okay, do you know how, is it the 100,000?
I believe that was 98,000.
98,000, but not necessarily for an additional role, or could
My
that
understanding
include?
is that's something that we would determine in the near future, what the right allocation of those resources is.
Okay, and how would you start making that decision? Does it depend on any of the historical pricing information that you need, or?
Yeah, it would involve that. It would involve the outcomes from Carbon Free Boston, the allocation of resources of the Greenovate and other teams.
So you wouldn't decide on the 98,000 and how to use that until after Carbon Free Boston is done?
It's potentially, depending on whether we get historical pricing before that.
And you said that Carbon Free Boston will be due back sometime in the fall.
In the fall.
And so we're near halfway through the fiscal year at that point to use up the funding. Okay, so just making a note of that for follow-up. To your knowledge, has Eversource communicated with the department about having a position on CCE?
That's something I don't have information on, but I could get it for you.
Okay, they're frequently in contact with each of these four, or is it primarily, I guess, the first two, climate and environment planning and energy policy and programs?
Mm-hmm.
So they're regularly in touch with you all?
They're regularly in touch with us.
Okay. Do you have a sense of how they would, whether they would have a position on CCE or have any stake in this?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you have a sense of whether they would have, whether Eversource would have a position on CCE or have any stake in this?
That's something I don't have information on.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I want to reiterate Councilor O'Malley's 2 points with the committee and with the consultant, but the 98,000 funding, which is a great thing, and I'll be very happy to vote for that. I think we need a lot more clarity on how that will be used, and most importantly, whether it could be used right away. I mean, waiting until after Carbon Free Boston to figure out even if that's funding for operations or funding for a position is concerning, because the fiscal year is near half done at that point.
No, just to clarify, we're evaluating right now what the next steps are and what the right allocation is.
So why was the $98,000 figure chosen? I'm just curious.
Again, I'm going to have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wu. So I think now I'm going to get to public testimony, unless anyone has any sort of concluding remarks or thought. We'll start with you and go all the way down.
Yes, so I actually wanted to talk about the historical data piece of this.
Great.
And I worry that might be an unnecessary obstacle to evaluating clean energy in Boston.
Okay.
When you look at the clean energy market, the cost of solar power, for example, has gone down over 10% per year for the last 10 years. It's a very dynamic market. When you look at wind power and offshore wind, we don't have a single wind turbine off the coast of Massachusetts, but we just announced a winning contract for 800 megawatts of it. This is a landscape that is changing very quickly. The economics of renewable energy are changing very quickly, and that's why you're seeing so much corporate uptake all across the country and around the world for renewable energy. The business case is changing very quickly, and I caution that perhaps looking at historical data may not be a good reflection of the opportunities here locally to build a clean energy economy and benefit the consumers of Boston.
That makes a lot of sense. That's well said. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm going to say the same thing in a different way.
Okay.
Historical energy prices are in no way a good indicator of future energy prices. If what the City of Boston is trying to find out is what will this program cost in the future going forward, then figuring out what it would have cost last year is not going to help with that, or not as much as other things would. There are other good methods for looking forward to find out good predictions of energy prices going forward, but last year's prices isn't one of them.
Thank you. Thank you. Ann, did you have any concluding remarks? Or?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, thank you. If you're able, I know you guys all have busy schedules, but thank you for that. If you're able to sort of stay and hear some of the public testimony, I'd really appreciate it. We have quite a few people. I'm going to ask everyone, please keep to a 2-minute limit. I will very gently tap my mic when your 2 minutes is up. I'm going to read 3. You can line up at either of the 2 microphones in front of the panel. So first is Indiana Reed Shaw or Eugenia Gibbons, either of those 2. Then Michelle Brooks and Crystal Aneke, A-N-E-K-E. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing that.
Where are we standing?
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so good afternoon, Chairman O'Malley, Councilors Wu and Flynn. Thank you for this opportunity to comment today. My name is Indiana Reed Shaw, and I'm a program associate at Mass Energy Consumers Alliance. We're a Boston-based nonprofit working to make energy more affordable and sustainable since our founding in 1982. And our mission is to harness the collective power of energy consumers to accelerate the transition to a low-carbon future. So with that, we are strong supporters of municipal aggregation because it offers an alternative to competitive suppliers and to basic service. Mass Energy recently released a report on green municipal aggregation. I just gave out some of the executive summaries, hopefully you can read, about the successes we've seen so far. But basically, aggregation restores transparency to the energy purchasing process by offering community members a well-vetted product and the ability to opt out at any time without penalty. With this in mind, we thank you and your colleagues on the City Council for unanimously passing an authorization last October for CCE. We thank Mayor Walsh for this endorsement of the authorization, and in doing so, this will be an important first step in moving the city closer to participating in electric aggregation for residents with in-region renewable energy. And then finally, we'd also like to thank the staff of the Environment, Energy, Open Space for their testimony about progress to date and the implementation of this order. We understand the importance of getting the details right, but also caution against allowing perfection to become the enemy of good. With regard to historic pricing, it is impossible to rely on any price information, historic or otherwise, to accurately inform an aggregation that is unlikely to start within a year or more. One purpose of aggregation is to harness the bulk purchasing power of the community to deliver savings to residents and small businesses. And Boston's greatest asset is its size, and that should be used to its advantage. A qualified consultant would guide the city on matters of this, and of course with well-informed stakeholders helping as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're done?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. How much more do you have? I just want to be fair to everybody. Can you
I'll just
wrap it up quickly?
I'll wrap it up quickly.
Thank you.
So the time to act is now. Climate change and the city of Boston can't wait. Let's start writing the plan, getting public input, getting DPU approval, and putting it out to bid.
Thank you. Thank you, Indiana. Michelle Brooks, welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Brooks, and I serve as the Boston.
Carrie will turn them on. You don't have to press everything. It just sometimes it'll take a second or so. But
Can you?
Yep.
Okay, there we go. Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Brooks, and I serve as the Boston Community Organizer for the Massachusetts chapter of the Sierra Club. I'm speaking on behalf of our 10,000 plus members and supporters in the city of Boston to express our deep concern and frustration with the delay of the implementation of community choice energy. The city's Environment Department has taken an untraditional approach by issuing an RFI after the City Council unanimously voted last October to authorize CCE. It was stated in the RFI that participation was not a requirement in order to partner with the city on this effort. Energy brokers often include this information in their formal bid to the municipality or in informal sessions prior to the release of the RFP. using this as a reason to fold CCE into the Carbon Free Boston study, which won't finish its report until late October 2018, is denying the residents of the city the opportunity to reap the benefits of CCE right now, which has proven to be the single most effective way for municipalities to aggregate their electricity buying to stabilize rates and increase access to renewable energy for residents of all incomes. There have been many studies done to show this. We don't need to spend another 5 months studying its effectiveness, and we don't have time to waste. The city is not on track to meet its goal of reducing carbon emissions by 25% by the year 2020, and we know that implementing CCE can help us get there, so why wait? I urge the City of Boston to do everything in its power to see through implementation of this program in a timely manner, and I want to thank the City Council for their time.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Crystal is next, followed by Ricky Harvey and Sarah Freeman. Hi, Crystal.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you guys for having me here today. My name is Crystal Neke. I'm a freshman at Fitchburg State University and a recent graduate from John D. O'Brien. I currently reside in South Boston, Massachusetts. I'm here today in full support of the community choice energy policy. The reason that being is because I am a product of immigrants. Both my parents aren't fully updated on like the opportunities that renewable energy can have on their lives. And people like that are the unrepresented class that fall victim to bad energy brokers. Knowing that, CCE is something that I don't understand the hesitation for. I don't understand why it's not being, if we have the opportunity to do this, why is it being delayed? Like, why is a constant delay for it? Coming from a country where they do delay climate change policies and like they're not taking it seriously, I see what pollution can do to a country. I see what the effect that it can have on the young youth in the country. So knowing that there's a policy in place that could prevent things such as this nature, it's just shocking to me that we're not taking advantage of this. It's shocking to me that our current officials aren't taking this as seriously as it needs to be. And that being said, I hope that you guys see today that this policy would be one of the factors that can decrease climate things that are current, like the climate things that are current in our country today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Crystal. Thank you. Ricky Harvey, Sarah Freeman, Joe Okafor.
I'm going to skip the bulk of mine because Michelle covered it very well and get right to the point. It is just common sense that aggregations have the ability to negotiate better rates since there are more customers. While there is no guarantee that aggregations will save money, they have more flexibility when they procure. For an aggregation as large as all Boston residents, wouldn't there be a pretty good chance that a broker could negotiate better rates for us, even with an increase of 5% renewables? Why not proceed with the process and see what rates we are offered? While we appreciate Allison's being here this morning, it is profoundly disappointing that the chief of the mayor's environment department would not attend today's hearing and answer the council's questions about the lack of an implementation process. It is but one more example of the lack of leadership on important environmental initiatives from EEOS. It is one more example of EEOS listening more to Eversource than to the residents of Boston. It is one more example of EEOS not following the unanimous wishes of our city council. This leaves me with one question. Why does Mayor Walsh keep letting this happen?
Thank you, Ricky. Sarah Freeman, Joe Okafor, and Andy Bean.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Freeman from Jamaica Plain, and on behalf of the Arborway Coalition, who in general, if it's good for the environment, we're for it. And I think it's pretty open and shut that CCE is the single most effective step the city could take. I echo what has been said before, and in just simply looking at the pros and cons, it reminds me, the process reminds me of a quote from a fellow JP resident years ago, that process feels more important than the product. And it's like, no one wants the city to rush headlong into a bad deal, but I think people need to feel that we're on a path that's getting to a product sooner rather than later. And the amount of research would be the same now or 6 months from now. So I think we all need to feel that it's a real priority, not an academic research project. And I'll close with a very small quote from the Globe within the past week. The headline is, "O'Malley calls for climate change action," and I think they should revise it to two O'Malleys, because the O'Malley here is our cardinal, Sean P. O'Malley, and I'll read a little bit of this and then leave it for the record. The Roman Catholic Archbishop of Boston led hundreds of local religious leaders and scientists appealing for action on climate change. O'Malley was among the 500-plus signatories to endorse an appeal calling for the climate crisis to be addressed, quote, "with the boldness and urgency it requires, with substantive and immediate action. Climate change is an ecological and moral emergency that impacts all other aspects of our shared lives and requires us to work together to protect our common home." Can't say it any better than that. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Sarah.
Do you want this? Or?
Yep. Please grab. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Shane will take it from you. Joe Okafor, Andy Bean, Ben Hellerstein, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Okafor, and I'm a 2017 Boston Public Schools graduate, an alumnus of the Boston Student Advisory Council and Youth on Board, a rising sophomore at Boston College, and most importantly, a resident of Boston. I recognize how influential community choice energy can be in regards to reducing our carbon footprint and combating climate change, and that is ever important in a coastal city. The terrible effects of major storms due to climate change has bombarded our media with horrific images of tragedy after tragedy. While we are lucky enough to not have had any of those storms heavily affect our city in particular, that can change if we do not combat climate change head on. This is exactly why we need to implement community choice energy. As a young person who has been born and raised in Boston, thinking about the possible negative effects climate change could have on my city scares me. It scares me even more because those effects aren't only a possibility. Research has shown that we will be more vulnerable to major storms if we do not tackle the issue of climate change right now. That is why the implementation of community choice energy needs to begin in order for us to protect our residents as soon as possible. With the storms in Houston, Florida, and Puerto Rico, among many others, we watched entire communities be destroyed, and those places will never be the same again. We have to take action now by reducing our carbon footprint and increasing the use of renewable sources in our energy mix through community choice energy. We can do our part to help prevent catastrophic storms like those from affecting our people by using clean energy, and that is exactly what we should do. Thank you, City Council and everyone.
Thank you, Joe. You know, can I just say one of the great benefits of my job is now having been in office for 8 years, I've worked with BSAC from day one, and I've seen so many young men and women go through involvement with that, particularly on environmental issues. And I just have to say, Joe, you and your colleagues, you're such a credit to this city, and you give me such hope for our future. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Andy Bean, Ben Hellerstein, Jacqueline Sector, I believe. Thank you. Andy.
Hi. If it's okay with you, I'd like to pass my spot to this gentleman so that the kiddo can get down for a nap.
Oh, aren't you kind? Thank you. Yes, and thank you.
My name is David Vitali Wolf. This is my son, Micah Kaiser Wolf. He's another young person who will be affected by climate change long after I'm gone and many of us are gone. And I just wanted to bring to our attention that the focus on present utility bills and the increasing cost of community choice energy seems very short-sighted given the effects of climate change on our community, on Boston, on the livability of Boston and the livability of our planet. And so I just want to reinforce the urgency of this and encourage all people involved to eliminate these delays and move forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Micah. Appreciate it. Andy, we're going to take you now since that was a very kind thing. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Andy Bean. I work with Boston Climate Action Network. And the first thing, the context for this hearing is that Boston is not on track. We have set goals around climate change, greenhouse gas pollution reduction. By 2020, we want to have a 25% reduction. As of the data that I dug out of the EEOS budget, we had a reduction of 12% last year. We're less than halfway there, and we've got not much time left. Now, CCE is a way to almost overnight have a huge impact on our greenhouse gas pollution output, and it's a way that we can do that without major expenditure. The reason that we're all here is not because we are arcane sort of fetishists for like utility structure. We don't care about where the electricity or what structure it's bought in. We care about acting on climate and preserving this world for the next generation. And the reluctance and the desperate lack of urgency from the mayor's office and from EEOS is galling. And that's what got so many of us out in the middle of a workday, many of us taking off of work to be here to say, we appreciate the work that the City Council has been doing. They've done the homework. They've talked to stakeholders. They get it. We need to act on climate. We need to cut our carbon pollution. And we want the mayor and his administration to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Ben Hellerstein, I think Ben may have left us. Last call for Ben Hellerstein. Jacqueline Sector is next. After Jacqueline, Ken Sazama, I'm not sure. Are you yes or no? No, okay. All right, go ahead, see. Kevin Batt, and then Lee Humphrey. So last call, no Ben Hellerstein. I think he left, okay. Jacqueline, Kevin, and then Lee. Jacqueline.
My name is Jacqueline Sector, and I live in Jamaica Plain with my husband, Roman, and my two young children, Benjamin, who's 6 years old, and Amelia, who's 2.5. You might have seen them in the video footage earlier. They're at school today, so they couldn't be here. I'm a volunteer with Mothers Out Front, so it should come as no surprise that I'm deeply concerned about climate change and the impact that will have on my children's future and all children's future. And I think we need to get real and note that it's not just about their future, because climate change is happening now. We're seeing it locally, we're seeing it nationally, and we're seeing it all over the world. Whether it's catastrophic hurricanes, flooding, ongoing relentless wildfires, climate change isn't a distant threat. It is happening right here and right now, and it affects all of us, particularly vulnerable communities. But I don't think I need to convince anyone of that here. Last year, when the Boston City Council unanimously voted to pass community choice energy and Mayor Walsh signed off on it, it was a moment of excitement and pride. I was proud of Boston, and I felt proud to be a resident of Boston. There was also an immense feeling of relief. Relief because we know that community choice energy is a critical step towards mitigating the worst effects of climate change. And we know that every single day that we delay in implementing it is a wasted opportunity, taking us further away from achieving this goal. So I thank you so much today for holding this hearing. I thank you for passing community choice energy, and I urge the city to implement it as soon as possible. We just don't have time to delay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Kevin Batt, is Kevin here? Okay. Mr. Humphrey, you are next, followed by Ryan Grieser, and then Cam Wilson.
Yeah, my name's Lee Humphrey, and I'm a member of the Green Committee of the Back Bay and the Boston Clean Energy Coalition. And I'm here to advocate adopting CCE, which has many justifications. But in addition to these justifications, the reason it is important is that it will counteract some of the disappointments in other environmental areas. And there are two I'm especially familiar with: Boston's Climate Action Plan and Boston's gas leaks. Well, what's going on with Boston's Climate Action Plan? The goal is to reduce the emissions, the 2005 emissions, by 25% by 2020. And so far, we've reduced emissions as of 2015 by 13%. This means we have to reduce the next 5 years by 12%. Is that likely? No. Particularly since the last year that emissions went down was in 2012. In 2013, 2014, and 2015, emissions went up. And then there's all the new construction. Well, there are 3 categories of buildings that are presently before the BPDA. Those under review, those that have been approved, and those that are under construction. That amounts to over 90 million square feet. And there's nothing that I've seen that indicates these new buildings are going to be any more efficient than the existing buildings. So what that means is that the emissions from the new buildings will be an insoluble plug that will be with us for years. And the disappointing bottom line, we are probably going to miss our 2020 emissions goal substantially. I think this is being realized because no one talks much anymore about 2020. We're now starting to talk about 2050 and a reduction of 80%, but that's 32 years away. So going to the gas leaks, in each of the last 3 years, the number of gas leaks increased. You probably know that leak gas is mostly methane, a greenhouse gas that is 80 times as powerful as its heat-trapping capabilities as carbon dioxide. And it's no longer natural gas, it's fracked gas, which contains a lot of harmful chemicals like benzene and formaldehyde. People with respiratory problems and pregnant women should stay away from fracked gas.
Thank you, Ms. Humphrey. If you
Okay.
could just wrap it up.
Yeah, okay. What's this do with, well, CCE is just a way to counteract what these other disappointments. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you, Lee. Ryan Grieser, Cam Wilson, Mary Russell, please. Yep, Cam, I think Ryan is next.
Ryan is next.
Ryan, are you Ryan?
Yes.
Yep, Ryan's next, then Cam, and the next is Mary Russell. Then
My name is Ryan Grieser. I'm really appreciative that as a community member here in Boston, I have the opportunity to be here to talk with the group today about this issue that we all care a lot about. I think it's really special. It's really urgent that we work on fighting climate change because the effects of human-caused historic emissions have been measurable and have had a significant impact. I guess I'd like to I'd like to say that again because I don't believe I was clear with my words. Fighting climate change is urgent because the effects of human-caused historic emissions have had a measurable, significant impact. The electricity sector accounts for roughly 1/3 of annual emissions of annual greenhouse gas emissions in this city. The electricity sector, I'm sorry guys, I'm sorry everyone that I'm not prepared to be speaking right now. Electricity supply that comes from a greater portion of zero emission sources is a way for the city of Boston to show leadership to other governments, to other city governments, and help transition our energy systems to sources that don't increase our atmosphere's greenhouse gas concentrations. And I want to say thank you for the leadership and commitment on this issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. You did great. Thank you. Councilor Wu just had to step out to deal with one of her sons, but she will be back. Cam Wilson is next, then Mary Russell, and then Alan Palm. Ms. Wilson?
Hi, I'm Cam Wilson from JP. I'm in 350.org and Boston Climate Action Network. We need CCE now because worldwide people are already drowning and dying of heat, and we need CCE not just in Boston, not just to meet Boston's goals, but the reason that we have these goals is that we need to bring emissions down worldwide, to do what we can to stop the Atlantic Ocean current to keep the Atlantic current going. It's slowing down already, and if we don't act now, it could stop and possibly cause and kill all life on Earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Mary Russell, Alan Palm, James O. Michelle John.
Yes,
Hi.
hello, thank you. My name's Mary Russell. I live in Roslindale. I'm a painter, and I've been painting the disappearing Arctic ice cap for about 5 years now. And we've all been talking about being reasonable, about going forward, what is reasonable, what isn't reasonable. And I want to talk about how unreasonable it is for us not to go completely outside of our everyday activities in this process. It's difficult to imagine the situation that human beings are in now because it is completely unimaginable. We are living with the effects of carbon that was released 20 years ago. We have 20 more years of really bad things happening, and our hair should be on fire. My sources here is the New York Times. The level of summer sea ice is the lowest that has ever been recorded. The Arctic, at some point in the last winter, was warmer than Spain because the jet stream is slowing as the Arctic melts, and parts of the jet stream, it split. The jet stream split, moving cold air down to Spain and warm air up into the Arctic. And as Cam mentioned, the Gulf Stream has slowed. It's estimated by one researcher to have slowed 15%. This is a major driver of the climate that we are used to grow our food. So I just want to say that I really appreciate the work, but we all need to act like our hair is on fire, just the way we wished people had acted before 9/11. All the people said, well, we knew something was happening, our hair was on fire. Our hair is on fire. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Alan Palm, James Michelle, and Monica Briggs, please.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Alan Palm. I'm here in my role as the Director of Organizing for 350 Mass. And we're a statewide network of volunteers fighting fighting climate change, and that includes dozens of active residents of Boston. And the things I want to talk about briefly are urgency and leadership. Cities around the Commonwealth take their cues and their direction from the leadership of Boston, and that is true for cities around the United States and around the world as well. And has been made clear earlier, we are not on track to meet the goals of Paris, and it is really up to cities that have the potential to take bold action on climate change to do so. Really, delay is a tactic that has been employed by the fossil fuel industry for decades. And delay will cost us millions of lives. And that's the reality. The residents of Boston want community choice energy. The people of the world desperately need the leadership of Boston to do all that we can. And who does delaying benefit? It benefits the investor-owned utilities. And so we want to challenge the Wall Street administration to prove to us that the will of their residents means more than the profits of the investor-owned utilities. That if you're serious about going carbon-free, if you're serious about the commitment to Paris, to upholding our responsibility to the rest of the world, it's time to implement CCE. It's time to take action now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. John and Monica. And then the last person that I have who signed in, is Micah, who I believe left with his dad. So John and Monica, and then is there anyone else who wishes to testify that either didn't sign it? Okay, please, of course, if you just want to line up, and then anybody else? Okay, just come on, line down. I apologize if I missed your name or if you didn't sign it off, but that'll be it. Please, John.
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley and the Environmental Committee. I think pretty much everyone here has covered all the important points. The urgency that the folks in this room feel about the issue of climate change, and the frustration, disappointment, and I'm carrying right now the sorrow of the missed opportunities, the lack of leadership, when it's desperately needed, it's urgent, and yet it's not happening. And how do we get, you know, as Mary Russell said, how do we get people to have their hair on fire? What do we do to get people to wake up? We have a system now where the fossil fuel industry, which certainly includes the frack gas industry, which certainly includes the investor-owned utilities, is telling us that gas is a bridge fuel, that it's almost renewable. You've seen the ads on TV. It makes butterflies fly and birdies sing. It's cheap. It's wonderful. A couple of weeks ago, a group of environmental activists brought to Jamaica Plain and to Lowell and to the State House and to the site of the Back Bay Billionaires Pipeline, a group of activists from Pennsylvania who are in the sacrifice zones of the fracking fields, who told us stories of incredible destruction and damage to their communities, to their personal health. We had a little 10-year-old cute little boy pulling hair out of his head, showing us, you know, the loss of his father, showing us the loss of hair. He's pre-leukemia. They've got neurologic diseases. This stuff is not clean. It's dirty. It's awful. We need to get off it. That's established. The position of the Walsh administration is that frack gas is the bridge fuel, and we are proceeding in that fashion as if it is. How do we convince them otherwise? I'm thinking now, I've been thinking actually for some time about a fellow named David Buckell. He was a nationally known activist and lawyer who won several important cases on behalf of the LGBTQ community and their rights. And at the time of his recent death, he was known as the composting king of Brooklyn. Mr. Buckell self-immolated last month in Prospect Park, Brooklyn. His suicide note included some of the following. Most humans on the planet now breathe air made unhealthy by fossil fuels, and many die early deaths as a result. My early death by fossil fuel reflects what we are doing to ourselves. He added, honorable purpose in life invites honorable purpose in death. My question remains, what do we do to convince the Walsh administration and our fellow citizens that we have to move quickly away from fossil fuels?
Thank you, Joe. Okay. Monica?
Good afternoon. My name is Monica Briggs, and I live in Jamaica Plain. I'm a member of Boston Climate Action Network. And I'm presenting a very personal part of this whole issue. I am low income, but I still want to be part of the climate solution, and sometimes that's a little tricky. But there are a lot of door knockers who come to your door offering very tempting clipboards and solutions to your green energy wishes. And I've been lured into 2 of their contracts and had to fight hard to combat the fine print and get out of paying a much larger amount of money for my green electricity than I had planned. And these door knockers are all over the city, and they're plaguing the vulnerable, the old, and the low income. So a CCE for me is a really unique opportunity for something that's vetted, something that's citywide, something that has been proven 140 times over by the state of Massachusetts to be effective. And it's also an opportunity for somebody like myself to be part of a very ambitious and very vital effort to combat climate change, and there aren't a whole lot of opportunities to do that for people who are low income, who may not have the education to understand various ways of being involved. And this is also a way of spreading information and hope about how to be part of something that is hopeful and that can actually help the planet when sometimes it feels very overwhelming that there's not much out there. So it educates people about ways to change the world that might not have access to that. So I really encourage CCE to be a reality and to give everyone an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So any individuals whom I didn't call who would like to testify, please just say your name in affiliation or address for the record. And again, we'll try to keep it to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Claire Humphrey. I'm from Mothers Out Front. And I have a 14-year-old son as well as a 16-year-old daughter. And I recently spent about 3 days trying to get my son to put his baseball uniform in the car to go back to school. 3 days on this. Mom, I know. Mom, after I play basketball with my friends. Mom, I need to finish my homework first. So, and I wasn't asking him to actually return it. This is not guaranteeing that he will get it out of the car on his way out of the car to school, or that he will find his coach and actually return the thing. Just get started. So when I hear Mayor Walsh's office and Austin Blackman's office saying, we need to wait until I finish playing with the other mayors at the conference, or after my report comes in and I have all the homework, I'm like saying, Mayor Walsh, I am saying, Mothers Out Front is saying, and the citizens of Boston, whose duly elected council voted unanimously on this, don't make me have to come up there again.
Thank you, Claire.
Good afternoon. I think afternoon right now. Yes, my name is Stefan Dörre. I've been living in Boston since 23 years now. I'm a homeowner in Roslindale. I have 2 twin daughters that just are graduating from Boston Latin School. And I hadn't planned to say anything, but I think the way I hear the things are going, the way I heard this testimony, prompted me to make some remarks here. So first of all, thank you, City Councilors Wu and O'Malley, for holding this hearing. I'm a little bit frustrated that this hearing is even necessary. And I want to make 3 short points. I'm a scientist. I've been a scientist since probably I was a little kid, so I've been doing AIDS and cancer research for over 20 years. Lately more training people for the biotech industry. And I know science is very important. It's very important that we understand things in order to act. We do science if we don't understand something. If we understand something fully, science should not be an excuse not to act. Oh, let's do another study. Let's figure this out in a better way. If I'm a doctor, I can't wait for the researchers to find the cause of a disease in 20 years if my patient is here now. And the same is true for the environment. If I look at our dysfunctional administration in Washington, we have to do more studies. We really don't understand whether climate change is human-made. So doing more studies can be an excuse to not act. And we see a lot of people that are doing that. The second point is, coming back to CCE, I've been involved with the Boston Climate Action Network now for 3 months and learned a little bit about all the things that need to be done. I read the Boston greenhouse gas emissions and the climate action plans. There is so much to do. CCE is a very small part of that. There is transportation, there is buildings, as we heard, there is the gas infrastructure. Why does the city spend so much effort on that little thing, trying to perfectionate it if they could outsource it? We heard the testimony of how it seems like the staff is overworked. There are so many things that are going on. There is not clear who is doing what. And CCE is something that could be outsourced, so I don't understand why the city embraces, let's work on CCE, let's make it more perfect. They can't afford to do that. And the last point I want to make, the testimony, I was very disappointed how evasive, how very few answers, how often the lady had to say, I don't know. This shows the EOS department is not taking climate change serious. It shows, as we have heard, They are not on track for their 2020 goals. And I think this department needs a major shakeup. To me, it's a dysfunctional organization. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I see my friend Vicky Bach?
No, I'm just ready to be
Okay, well, always great to be with you, Vicky. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. I wanted to keep it to 2 hours. We're about 2 hours, 5 minutes, so well done. Just in conclusion, so I am not going to adjourn this hearing. I am going to recess this hearing. I hope to not have to have all of us back here in a hearing because, again, if we can, with Councilor Wu and I working together with the administration, establish some sort of a working group, I think that's a much better, that's A, what the legislation called for, and B, it's a better approach going forward. So, you know, I share the frustration. I think our message was heard loud and clearly, and again, you just have my word, and I know Councilor Wu's word. We're going to do everything I can to make sure this is done correctly, this is done well, and we stop tying our hands behind our back as we try to move this ball down the field. Commissioner Berwick, please.
So anything that I can do or the City of Newton can do to be helpful as you move forward with this, I'd be happy to do.
That's great.
Any conversations anybody in Boston wants to have.
No, I mean, obviously, thank you. We appreciate that. We will take you up on that. Your experience as both a DPU commissioner and in your new role in the City of Newton, I think you know more about this than probably anyone. So we really appreciate your spending time with us, and we'll continue to take you up on that.
Very happy to do it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councilor Wu? Okay. Well, thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear it for BCEC, BCAN, Mothers Out Front, BSAC, Sierra Club. Who am I missing? That was my first one, BCEC. Oh, West Roxbury Saves Energy, Arborway Coalition, all of you. And people from Newton and Arlington, of course. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all. This hearing is hereby recessed.